One of the most brilliant writers of our generation is gone, but he left us one last keepsake. The late David Foster Wallace's longtime editor will be here to talk about his final book that's out today. Stick around. As we mentioned at the top of the show, today is tax day, at least in tradition, if not this year in fact. One of the most little noticed provisions in the budget deal just passed in the House this week was an agreement that the Internal Revenue Service would receive no additional funds to hire new agents. This in spite of the fact that the Government Accountability Office estimates there is a total of $330 billion in unpaid federal taxes outstanding at this very moment. It's a lot of money. In case you don't have a calculator handy, it's 9 times the amount of money saved in the latest budget deal. Now, it's fairly politically easy to cut money for the IRS because, really, who likes tax collectors? Since the time of Jesus, telling people you're a tax collector has not exactly been the best opening line when making conversation at a cocktail party. Did they have cocktail parties in biblical times? I don't know, but I digress. Of course, without tax collectors, there are no taxes. And without taxes, there is no civilization. And so in this sense, the people who process those forms that we have or are about to mail in are all atlases. They hold all of this up. They are, in their quiet, anonymous way, kinds of heroes. And it is their quiet heroism that is the theme of a very much anticipated novel that is released today. That book is The Pale King. It's about a group of IRS agents in Peoria, Illinois in 1985, and it's also the final unfinished novel written by the late genius David Foster Wallace. Author of 2 previous novels and several collections of essays and stories, Wallace was considered by many, your host included, as the greatest writer of his generation. He killed himself on September 12, 2008, after a lifelong struggle with depression. At the time, he was working on a novel, one near but not at completion. In the wake of his death, his editor, Michael Pietsch, was left to take the copious pages left in his study, some printed and neatly stacked, others handwritten on pads, and somehow wrestle them into the form of a novel, the one that is published today. Joining us now is Michael Pietsch, the executive vice president and publisher of Little Brown and Company. And Michael, it's my great pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's my great pleasure.
Can you tell us the process? Seems tremendously difficult and daunting. The combination of just the sort of emotional grief of reconciling yourself to Wallace's death, and then to take all of these pages and somehow make a novel out of it. How did you go about doing it? How long did it take?
The challenge was like no challenge I've ever had. As you said, I was still in a state of grief when I first encountered these pages that David had left behind. But then, paradoxically, I found myself in his presence. The first chapter that I read was a chapter narrated by a character named David Foster Wallace, whose characteristics were very much like David's own. So I felt as though he were there, and I began to experience this world that he had created, this massive, comically brilliant, challenging world that he'd been working on for a decade. My task was to take this manuscript, which was close to 3,000 pages of various materials, a lot of it multiple drafts of the same chapters, and find the story he'd been attempting to write, that he had been writing, and then try to find the most coherent and most complete novel inside there that I could find. And what I found, I was awestruck by. It's a brilliant, massive world full of deep questions and challenges that are pertinent to our lives every day.
One of the themes in the book, and I have to say here up front, I don't want to pretend like I've read the book because I'm so much looking forward to it. I've been putting it off, so it's this thing that's out there, but I've been obsessively reading the reviews. And one of the main themes is the kind of boredom that these IRS agents have to deal with and tackling it day in, day out, which I think he calls a kind of heroism at one point in the book. What do you think attracted him to this topic?
I believe that what David Wallace wanted to do in writing this novel was try to write a novel that really looked deeply into ordinary people's, everyone's everyday lives, and to focus on emotional meanings that touch everyone, And what he looked at was the extraordinary complexity of everyday life when this age, he set the book in the past, but it could be in the present moment because we all are bombarded with these complex and sometimes tedious matters, and that's what much of life is made up of. And I think he was trying to work in this novel on how we fight through all of that to get at anything that really matters, including connecting to other human beings or finding love or finding the meaning of your life. You have to fight your way through boredom, through tedium, the way these IRS agents have to deal with the numbing work of looking at the numbers from other people's lives every day of their life.
I've been reading about the fact that he did a lot of preparation for this, and way far back, 10 years you just mentioned. What kind of things was he doing? I know that he was corresponding, right, with accountants and taking classes himself. How much did he sort of immerse himself in this world?
I received a box of the books that he used in research, and that included the IRS tax code from 1985, books on IRS from before that. He took accounting classes, and these books are heavily marked with David's notes. He studied accounting, not just accounting, but the tax code of 1985, and books about accounting and the IRS and resistance to paying taxes at that time, to understand as fully as possible what these agents' lives might have been like.
Michael Pietsch, he is David Foster Wallace's longtime editor and the publisher of The Pale King, which is out today. I thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.